Shalom Aleichem. Welcome to all. Today is Yom Sheni b'Shabbat, Monday, Yod Beth b'Mar Heshwan Tal Shin Pei Well, according to our Jewish calendar. And for those who require the Gregorian crutch, it is the 3rd of November 2025. Niminyan over there, Hastaluv. And I'm here today once again with two very interesting and erudite gentlemen. One is Rabbi Michael Friedman, who is also a psychologist and therapist, and the other is Rabbi Meir Rosenholz. I'm sorry, Dr. Meir Rosenholz, if I slip of the tongue. So welcome to you both. And one of the things I believe that you wish to discuss was a recent tragic suicide of a young Haredi, that is to say, ultra-Orthodox, so-called individual, teenage boy. And I know little about the facts of the matter, so please, either of you who know some of the facts at least, kick the ball into play.
From what I understand, a 20-year-old young man.
Oh, he was 20 years old. Okay, I thought he was younger.
Yeah, I also thought he was younger.
From what I understand, a 20-year-old young man is said to have jumped to his death from a premeditated act of suicide at the large protest / rally that was organized by much of the Haredi world in Yerushalayim a few days ago. And allegedly, the young man left a suicide note, and there was cause to believe that he was being bullied or excluded, in experiencing some form of terrible emotional pain. And if I understand, he's from a Chabad family. And I understand that his family had served the needs of the Jewish community in Korea some years ago. I'm not sure when he returned to Israel.
Do you mean to say that being from a Chabad family, he and his family's parents were running some kind of Chabad outpost in Korea?
That's my understanding.
I see. I'm not sure if that has anything to do with the topic, but okay, so it's a piece of information. So go on. Meir, what do you have to say?
To me, this just shows that a system is not working properly. The fact that nobody knew about it, it seems that it was totally under. I don't know exactly, but it seems that I remember seeing the grandfather was shocked. He had no idea this was going on. And I don't understand how can any yeshiva system not know that this is going on when there are so many parts of this. The boy, there's also the bullies, I should say, the bullies who they're also not well. And nobody, and nobody saw this was going on. Nobody tried. And maybe there were people who tried to stop it. I don't know, but it's very sad and it's alarming because I believe this goes on throughout the country. Bullying is a very big issue. And because of differences, and children love differences, and they find differences, they magnify them to the utmost degree, and they target. And these are not Torah ideas or values or behaviors. And Rabbanim have to be aware of this, and they have to immediately intervene and end this madness.
No question. Continue, please continue.
Yes, and I do believe it is incumbent upon the Rabbanim when they see this type of behavior, especially with young Bachrim, they have to immediately they must act and end it and make sure the parents are notified, make sure perhaps the menahel, the principal, is notified. I mean, this behavior is going on all over the place, and it has to be uprooted
That's
completely.
an interesting and very relevant point. Are you saying that you are aware
Mhm.
such behaviors
Oh,
being
yes.
ubiquitous or very
Well,
pervasive
yes, it's
in the
extreme.
Haredi world?
Yes, in Mistama, it's throughout Israel. The bullying, I've just seen it in this country.
It's not specific to Israel,
It's
but
not specific. I do think in America it's it's tolerated much less. It's immediately dealt with. From what I understand, I mean, I haven't been in America in a while, Baruch Hashem. So but I understand that it's just dealt with because it has become a secular issue, and the secular society has put an end to the bullying. It's like a campaign. It was a campaign here. It's just, and forget Chabad, but this is just going on with different within the same sects of Klal Yisrael. There's bullying. I've
but
heard this. Yes,
this was within the sect. In other words, within Chabad, correct?
well, I don't know. It could be. I'm guessing it could be this boy was Chabad and the other boys weren't. Perhaps that were around him. I don't know. But
Hmm.
in other words, it doesn't have to only be a Chabad or somebody from a different type of Yiddishkeit. It's within. The boys are getting picked on and ripped apart. It's literally. I mean, I hate to use the mashal, but I've heard this from one particular person who's a Talmud Chacham. It's literally the classroom is a war zone sometimes. Boys are attacking each other left and right.
And and you mentioned boys. Are you suggesting that
Well,
this kind of behavior is less prevalent amongst girls?
I was hoping you wouldn't ask that. Uh, I believe with girls it's even more vicious, but it's not physical. Boys, it's physical, and it's also biting, comments
When you
made.
say physical, are you saying that you either know or suspect that this individual uh,
Oh, I'm not speaking
who
about this
jumped to his
specific
death,
in,
or other situations when speaking about young men, there is actual physical violence involved?
I do think there's push with boys. I do think there's pushing and hitting and verbal abuse. Absolutely. With girls, it probably stops there. It stops at just vicious comments, like really terrible, nasty comments to each other. Girls, they're not as physical. I just think that's the obviously one of the differences.
No,
Boys, it's
that's
more
definitely correct.
right.
It's not less physical,
Hmm.
but
Right.
they but so I understand young women or women in general can be very vindictive.
Yes. Yes. Right. And it's just I guess the focus is just on the boys because perhaps that's front and center. But the bullying is just it's it's in other words, I want to know where's the leadership? Where are Rabbanim saying something like this should never be tolerated in Klal Yisrael? I mean, where is and
So
because this
that
is
goes
not
without.
something that just happened now. This is not something this has been going on for a very long time, and I have yet to hear in the news rabbi whoever condemns in the strongest way any attack within the classroom. I just don't hear it.
There is no question that such phenomena are not only unacceptable, but need to be eradicated completely.
Absolutely.
And for that, there has to be awareness. It
Hmm.
could well be that many rabbanim and many menahalim, many principals, call them what you will, of various institutions, are not sufficiently aware of of such phenomena. So
Hmm. How
the
could that
first
be?
thing is to make people more aware.
How is it how is it possible that a rabbi or Rav or a Malamed is teaching a class and doesn't know that boys are ripping each other apart? I'm not saying it's happening everywhere, but it's definitely ubiquitous. It's definitely happening more than it should. And it literally is so damaging. I'm sure Michael can also attest to the fact the damage that is caused by peers is is unmistakable, and it doesn't just disappear. Those wounds do not, excuse me, those wounds do not just faint. They do not just fade away. They last.
I think there are a few issues going on simultaneously. I would say that one is obviously suicide, which I
That's the
think
extreme.
it's worth talking about right now
Mhm.
in just a moment, from a mental health standpoint and a cultural standpoint and a religious standpoint. Another another topic would be, as you're mentioning, Mayor, is the culture of young men using language with each other that doesn't cultivate maturity. It doesn't cultivate bringing out the best qualities. It's not befitting of Torah students, of Jews. It's not befitting of people with refined character, and that's pervasive. I think both in the general society, non-Jewish, and in the Jewish society, and and then there are some other tracks also that are pertinent, including public safety, that the condoning reckless behavior and dangerous behavior like climbing 20 feet on cranes on open window construction sites to get better views of 200,000 people at this rally that were happening, that were photographed, which were condoned until the point of this young man's death, at which point, if I understand correctly, the MC dissuaded people from ascending and climbing at that point after he jumped and after the death, which of course caused public calamities, as we know, some 5 years ago or so in Meron, with 45 unnecessary deaths and others. So I think there may be three different tracks here. One is speaking about the suicide and the implications of it, our calls to act. The other is, as you mentioned, this culture of using language to tear each other down, which is appalling and can lead, it's appalling in its own right, and it can lead and bleed over into the suicide path. And then there's also the condoning of dangerous and negligent criminal behavior, or at least, if not criminal, criminally negligent behavior.
A question that I must ask is, was this behavior directed at this young man in any way connected to social media, internet, social media groups? Was that the forum in which this bullying or some of this behavior was taking place, or was it entirely face to face in the real world, so to speak, not in the virtual world?
It's a great question. I don't have all the facts. What does seem to be public record is that the young man wrote on his social media his final farewell message, which stated, I'm going to pull up what's being reported right now, quote, "To all my dear and true friends, I love you. I ask for forgiveness. I can no longer cope. I say goodbye to you with tears in my eyes, and we will meet together with the Mashiach, the Messiah." End quote.
Hmm. Okay.
There are allegations also of other young men having some encounter with him the day before. I'm not sure the nature of that, but that allegedly, some of these young men are now asking for forgiveness and are beset with guilt and are seeking to publicly apologize, including going to the grave of the young man who killed himself.
Well, all of that, of course, is not only uh, called for, but it is the least they could do, and it's only the beginning of their teshuvah, their repentance that they must begin dealing with, even though it's a terribly difficult kind of sin and het and avera and avon to deal with. It is terrible. It is beyond belief. I want to point out that according to the Torah, Chazal say explicitly that one Jew who raises his hand doesn't strike him, just raises his hand against another Jew as if he's about to strike him is called a rasha. Okay, I have on more than one occasion, caused disquiet, shall we say, in certain circles by pointing out in various shiurim that I've given that there is a concept in the Torah of Rasha, of Rish'uth. Rasha is literally it's a difficult word to translate, really. But the best translation, I think, in the Jewish concept, the Torah concept of a Rasha, is someone who breaks the law. In other words, a technical halachic definition of a Rasha is any Jew who deliberately transgresses a negative commandment of the Torah. Mitzvot lo ta'aseh in the Torah. It can be a less major mitzvot lo ta'aseh, a less one of the more minor sins, but that's something which is defined as sinful and forbidden by the Torah. Or it can be something much more serious, of the most serious kind as well. Any Jew who does such a thing is called a Rasha. What Chazal are adding when they make that statement about raising one's hand against another Jew is that it doesn't say so in the Torah. In other words, that appellation is being applied to a person for doing something which the Torah does not explicitly mention as being a negative commandment, a mitzvot lo ta'aseh, written in the Torah. And yet, Chazal say, you should know, a person who just raises his hand against another Jew, just thinks of doing such a thing, for whatever reason. I mean, let's imagine the most mundane and most inexcusable kind of situation. Two Jews are looking for a parking spot in a place where there's very little parking to be found, and two people see a certain spot where they may park their car, and each one thinks that he saw it first, or whatever it is, and they get out of their car and they start shouting at each other, which that already is something that should not happen. It shouldn't get to that point at all. And let's say it does, and let's say one raises his hand against the other, and he even stops himself. He doesn't hit him. He doesn't do anything. But they get into a very heated argument, and he raises his hand against the other. Well, that Jew is defined by the Torah as a Rasha, just for thinking that or doing that. It goes without saying that Kal Vahomer, how much more so, is a Jew a Rasha if he actually strikes another Jew without reason. In other words, without justification. If you are defending yourself from another person, Jew or otherwise, who is attacking you physically, obviously you're allowed to defend yourself, clearly. And if that person is trying to kill you, you are allowed to kill that person before he kills you. That's the well-known statement of the Chachamim, of the halacha of Rodef, a person who a Rodef. There's much confusion about this, of course, in the world in general, and the Torah world also. A Rodef is not an enemy combatant or a member of an enemy population, such as the Islamo-Nazis of various types and persuasions. We're talking about a Jew, two Jews, one Jew, and they had a heated argument, as we described before, and one loses control to the extent that he pulls out a knife and starts running at the other Jew and saying, I'm going to kill you. A terrible situation to imagine, but let's say that's what's going on at that moment. That Jew, it doesn't matter how long his beard may be, it doesn't matter how much kavanah he said Kriyat Shema that morning. At that moment, that Jew is defined. He's trying to kill another Jew at that moment because he's lost. He has no self-control at this moment, or he chooses not to control himself. He was very insulted by this person, or whatever the case may be. Or this other person stole money from him and he refuses to pay, whatever it is. At the moment he pulls out a knife, shall we say, and runs after the other Jew and says, I'm going to kill you, he becomes a rodef, which means literally a pursuer, a person who is trying to kill another person. And at that moment, every other Jew in the vicinity who is in a position to prevent him from committing such a dastardly act is required to try and do so, if necessary, by killing him. That's the halakha. It's halakha in the Talmud, it's halakha in the Rambam, it's halakha in the Torah, it's halakha in the Shulchan Aruch. It's not up for debate. So I was saying before, even a Jew who just raises his hand against another Jew without even intending to actually hit him, he's already defined as a rasha, as an evildoer, as someone who is acting in a criminal fashion. A person who actually strikes another Jew, not with a knife, chas v'shalom, he punches him, not in a situation of self-defense or something of that type. He's obviously a rasha, even more so. And here we come to our discussion. People who deliberately persecute another Jew, verbally, they ostracize this person. They organize some kind of harem against this other person. So he's deliberately ostracized, and his life is made into a misery by one or more people who know this individual. Clearly, they are Rashaim Gedolim. They are very, very evil people, even if they never laid a finger on him. This is something that has to be made very clear. And if it's not clear in whatever society, whether it's Haredi or secular or other societies, it has to be made very clear that this is a very, very serious act of criminality. Mamash, no question about it. And we see in extreme cases, it can lead literally to bloodshed, whether it's suicide or otherwise. So this is something that obviously cannot be tolerated, nor can it be ignored. It has to be discussed very seriously and dealt with very seriously.
I don't know that the Rabbanim are addressing this type of behavior on a consistent basis. I hope they are, and I hope I'm totally wrong. But to me, it's so obvious that this is part of the sickness that pervades Klal Yisrael these days. We have to look at what's going on, and we don't need Gedolim. I think we need Ketanim, because the Gedolim are on such a high level. They don't. I'm not saying that I know that they know what's going on in the bottom half of Klal Yisrael. You need people in the bottom half to be able to say what's going on, to what needs to be confronted. This is
in the Haredi world. In order to get anything moving, you need to somehow get the more well-known Rabbanim on board. So
right.
that's what maybe it shouldn't necessarily work in that fashion, but that's how the Haredi society functions.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there's also something very good about that. There's probably a bit of both. There's some positive and some negative aspects to that reality, because that reality also opens up the possibility of abusing that contact with Gedolei Torah by unscrupulous people or family members to get them to sign this or that declaration or this or that document, or to make this or that announcement, and they can be manipulated. Many, as you say, these Gedolei Torah, being on a very high level, and here, this is a problem. I'm not justifying it, but it's a reality. Many of them are not in touch with various aspects of reality, and they can easily be manipulated, and they are constantly, as I think anyone in the know understands. One of the best and more recent examples is the Shekerona, the COVID scam and everything connected with it, where many Haredi Rabbanim were manipulated and bamboozled by various people, some of whom were even family members, and others were other people who somehow have influence over them. And they got them to sign all sorts of things or to make various statements, which some of them also later regretted. But it was already too late. Many people had already injected themselves with these untested and extremely dangerous substances. So, because it was supposedly a mitzvah in HaTorah to follow legal advice, which is a whole topic we could discuss, and we perhaps should do. But that halacha was misunderstood or misinterpreted and misused, and you need rabbanim who are in touch with the real world. I think this is one of the reasons that the halacha is, as we all know, that on the Sanhedrin, the Hachamim have to speak many languages. Why would you need to speak various languages? Because you have to be in touch with the real world to be able to judge all manner of things. Yeah, it's true. You don't need to speak another language to give a psak halacha as to whether this particular tablespoon that fell into a particular pot is kasher or not kasher, and how you make it, how you can need to kasher it. For that, you don't need to know other languages. True. And for many other questions as well. But there are many issues in the world where you need to be aware of how the world works. And knowing a language causes you to have a greater understanding with another culture, another reality, another people, another nation, and the world in general. That's true. This is one of the reasons why, for example, the Haredi world is opposed to their young people learning English. Now, I'm the first person to tell you that I have no particular love of English, in the sense that if we were able to conduct this discussion in Hebrew, I would immediately now switch to Hebrew. But I know that's not doable, and for a number of reasons, one of which is that there are many people who will listen to this discussion who will not understand it if it's in Hebrew. So I do what has to be done. But I personally, Baruch Hashem, speak Hebrew well. I have no difficulty in expressing myself or understanding Hebrew. And do I prefer Hebrew to English? I do, absolutely. Why? How could I not? How could one not prefer Lashon HaKodesh to a garbled form of Anglo-Saxon based on some early medieval Germanic dialects? With 60% of the words in the language having a root in Latin anyhow. Why would I prefer that? Obviously, I wouldn't prefer it. But yes, I speak it. It's my mother tongue as well. That's true. And you have to live in the real world, and you have to deal with reality. If you want to convey something to an audience, you have to find out, first of all, what language does this audience understand? And if you want to understand the world out there beyond your walls, your daled amot shel halacha, then you have to know what goes on there. And you can be easily bamboozled into thinking that what the health ministry is telling you is definitely Torah Emeth, it's halacha l'Moshe Sinai, because the health ministry said so. But if you know how the world works and who these people are who populate these ministries and these agencies and these jobs, and all the various interests and collusions that are not only occasionally what underpins the reality, but in fact always what underpins the reality, almost always, well, then you will take a very different view of what you're being told by this or that representative of the health ministry. But if you don't know that, because you don't know much about the world, you know about the Talmud and Rashi and Tosafot and the Rashba and the Rambam and everything else, but you don't know much about that, you're not in a position to express an opinion. I'm sorry to say. That's the reality. So speaking English is, so why does the Haredi world generally oppose their children, their young people learning English? Because they feel, and they have a point, that's opening a door to a foreign world. There's truth in that. But it's also a fact that if you live in complete isolation and in a blissful state of ignorance regarding the world outside, then you're gullible and you're ignorant and you are easily manipulated and misled. And that's not a positive outcome either. That's not how you can really conduct your affairs and your community's affairs for any great length of time without falling into all manner of pitfalls. So again, as with many things in the Haredi world, it's not that there is no truth in what they feel or think or say. but there's almost always more than one side to that coin. And the reverse side of the coin is not nearly as rosy as they would like to suggest. And all that has to be taken into account.
Mhm.
So
The-
go on.
there is a belief that a gadol, with all of his Torah, he automatically knows what's going on. He doesn't need to study the other topics. And it could be that was true with the Stiplers. That's all. I mean, they were mamish gadolim. I don't know how true that is now. I don't know, but this is the fantasy, the fantastical beliefs that, oh, he doesn't need to know me. He's a gadol and he knows all the Torah, and I'm going to ask him even though he doesn't know me, and he's going to tell me what to do. Or there's that fantastical thinking and belief
Yeah, I
that
think
is
you're
so
very correct
widespread.
about that. I think you're very correct about that. There is you call it a fantastical belief. You're right. It's a kind
Mhm.
of magical worldview.
Mhm.
No, it really is. It's not realistic. Yes, it is absolutely true, as it says in the additional Perek of Masechet Avot, in the Perek Shishi of Avot, that how kol ha'osek b'Torah lishma nehenim mimenu isa b'tushiyah. People will turn to him for advice, etc. And on many things, such a person is the very best person to turn to for advice. But one also has to understand that one requires the person being approached needs to have a certain ability to understand the problems and the issue that you're presenting and who you are and where you are, where you fit into the reality. And that is not always properly understood. And it's not only in the Haredi world, it's almost in every world, in every community, in every type of society or subset of a society. You will find generally a kind of one size fits all approach to everything. And that's not true. That can never be the case. One size cannot fit all. That's exactly what the Pasuk tells us. Hanoch la'na'ar al pi darko. Uh, so you have to take into account the person who's speaking to you. And there's now no. So what is the problem here? So I think before we continue, there was another issue that someone wanted to raise. I think it was you, Mayor. You said
Oh,
something about
oh,
lack of midoth or
right. To the
negative
Torah,
behaviors. Yeah, tell us more about
right. I just more again, it's more the fantastical thinking and beliefs that, oh, if I'm depressed, I should just learn Torah and it's going to help me to not be depressed. Or if I have a problem with a social issue, I'm going to just learn Torah and it's going to change me. And in general, people who are learning all day, they should be affected in a very positive way by the Holy Torah, by the Kodesh Kedoshim. Yet we see that I mean, it doesn't seem to be happening because people are still extremely unhappy. The way people treat each other, it's just something is wrong. It goes back to this from the very beginning of our discussions. Something is very wrong here, and it just goes back to that full circle. The Torah is
Mike.
not having the effect. I mean, everybody quotes the famous Gemara in Kedushin about the Torah, Barasi Tolo Torah, Barasulo Yitzhahara, Barasulo Torah Latavlin. That in that specific example, doesn't there are many, I mean, I guess we'll have to discuss it. Since there are many Bachrim struggling with Yitzhahara, and they're learning Torah, Gavaldik and Stark. It doesn't seem to be having that positive effect that Chazal told us it's supposed to, or that we were told that it is supposed to.
Rabbi Michael, what do you have to say?
Um, I think that this also goes back to our previous discussions, um, including all the things that get in the way of rational thinking. One of the things that gets in the way that we've said is pain. One of the things that gets in the way is love. Ava mekalkelet ashura. One of the things that gets in the way can be kaas, as my son says. One of the things can be hate. And over here, I think that there's a humanity, there's part of our humanity. One of the things that gets in the way over here is thinking that we're not human. So if we think that we're beyond our biological drives, our psychological drives, then we're easily susceptible to the idea that we can absorb the Torah without changing our character. I think the Rambam addresses this explicitly. It says a person of poor character traits, there's a hazard in teaching that person Torah. So I think it's sort of our cultural association, maybe this is by necessity, I'm not sure, is that we don't take someone who's unfit and unworthy, Eno Hagun, and we say we're not going to teach that person Torah. We don't do that, even though the Rambam, I believe, explicitly states this in Hilchot Yesodei Torah, if I'm not mistaken, that one should not teach such a person Torah. We've taken the cultural position opposite is no, go ahead and fill this vessel with the Torah, and hopefully that will transform the person's character. And Meir's pointing out we don't see that often. And so here I think this is, for some reason, we've decided it's best to just put all the Torah on someone and maybe hopefully they will open up, their hearts will open, and then the Torah
Mhm.
will sink in. And maybe that's a mistake or maybe it's not a mistake. But I think if we really if we take the Torah seriously, if we take also our biology and our psychology very seriously as people, we know that it's not always the case that will have a transformative effect. That I heard in the name of the Chavetz Chaim, I don't know if this is accurate, that someone with a bad character are called listim. They're like armed robbers if they have bad character traits. And if you teach that person Torah, then they will become listim mezuyanim. They will become armed bandits. So we're taking a bandit and we are arming him, except now we're arming that person with the Torah. And now the Torah will be wielded as a weapon against others.
It's excellent what you said about, and you summed it up beautifully in just a few words, that the Torah, our humanity has just, I don't need to be human. I'm just going to learn Torah and everything is going to be, it's a complete avoidance of the entire purpose of creation. I mean, the Bar Shalom gave the Torah to humans, not to robots, not to Kalim. I mean, it's exactly right, Michael. I mean, it's just we are humans. There's many behavioral, many different types of desires we have, and they cannot just be ignored. They have to be addressed instead of pretending, oh, it doesn't apply because I'm learning Torah. I mean, right? Is that
My father, Zecher Tzaddik Livracha, would say, it doesn't matter how much Torah he goes through, it matters how much Torah goes through him.
mhm, absolutely?
Yes, I would agree with all of that.
Mm.
And I would add that that this can this when I say this, I mean Jewish society and studying Torah and expecting positive outcomes and hoping for positive outcomes. Such things are only possible if we understand what the Torah is, and as you also pointed out, both of you, very correctly, if we do not lose sight of the fact that we are human beings, and this is not new. Chazal say, Lo nithanat Torah lemalachei hashareth. The Torah was not given to the angels upon high. The Torah was given to human beings. Now, I can tell you, for example, that I remember very, very clearly being told by Haredi relatives of mine, people, young men my own age at that time, when I was 18 years old. They were explaining to me how they themselves knew this to be the case. It was not unknown to them. It had not been hidden from them. It had, in fact, been drummed into them that the yeshiva world, when I said, I mean the Haredi yeshiva world, was a tevath noach. was an ark against the flood outside. Outside there's a flood, and that's true. If we don't understand that, then we don't understand anything. When I say a flood, I mean to say that the world about us in which we find ourselves today is completely corrupt. Corrupt in every sense, not just in the sense of taking money that doesn't belong to you. That as well, of course. I mean, just listen to the news from this morning about the last night. The so-called Advocate General of the IDF was arrested by the police at long last. I'm not saying I know what will come of all of this, but was at long last arrested. And it's clear she's admitted as much in writing that she committed various crimes having to do with making false accusations and forging videotapes in order to bolster claims by herself and her department in the army against righteous Jewish soldiers who did nothing wrong whatsoever, and quite the opposite. So she has admitted explicitly to some of these things already in writing. And yet, last night, at long last, it's not clear why it took so long. She was arrested. Again, we have to follow the news to see how all this will play out. This morning, what do I hear? The first time I turn on the news, I hear that the head of the Histadrut, which is the Israeli trade union movement, he and his wife and many top officials in the Histadrut, which is a anachronistic and unholy alliance of groups and individuals who can be traced back to an earlier socialist Zionist period of our history. They have tremendous control and leverage over much of the Israeli economy, more than probably any other similar organization anywhere on earth today outside of blatantly communist countries. So he was arrested on some corruption charge, which shouldn't surprise anybody, of course. It's the very same person, Ronen Bar David, who shut down the Israeli economy for days at a time in order to support the Kaplanuchbot, the Kaplanistim, who were trying to prevent, and were successful at that time, and still are successful up to this moment in time, in preventing any meaningful legal reform in our very corrupt society. But it's not just Israeli society, it's the entire world. It's important to admit that Israeli society is also riddled through with corruption and evil. And anyone who doesn't want to admit that is also fooling themselves. But that's the rule nowadays. It's not the exception. That is the rule. That is how the world works. One could say, to a largely accurately, that the world has always worked that way. But at least now, the difference is perhaps that it's out in the open. Everybody knows that everybody's corrupt. Everybody knows that the Prime Minister of the UK, Keir Starmer, is both corrupt and perverse and depraved. We know that. I won't go into the details, but we know this today. One could discuss the Chagos Islands deal that he has shepherded through, trying to get rid of the British sovereignty over these islands in the Indian Ocean. It's all riddled through with personal corruption, bribery, all sorts of things. I don't want to go into the details. Anyone who wishes can look all these things up. But these are very real examples of what we're discussing. The world, and not just the politics. It's not just the politicians, the people that you read about in the news, perhaps. It's not just that. It's society in general. Society in general out in the world out there. When I say out there, I mean beyond the walls of the Torah community has been corrupted completely on every level. And therefore human societies deteriorate. I don't have to go into details. We all know this is the reality. Let's just mention shooting sprees in the United States. Goes on all the time, correct? Suicide rates, particularly amongst young people around the world, are on the rise. Epidemic levels, fentanyl deaths, gangs, crime. You name it, wherever you look, the situation is disastrous beyond words. All this is true. The Haredi world, seeing this, has tried with some success to set up what they themselves describe, as I was saying, my own third cousins, okay, Haredi young men of my age at that time. They were the same age. They were learning in Ponevezh. I was learning in Mekazarav. They were telling me, this is a Tevath Noah. This is the Noah's Ark against the flood. What does that mean? That means that you have set up a yeshiva system which is not designed to teach Torah or spread Torah alone. That's not its only purpose. It's actually a social safety net, or a Torah safety net, or a spiritual safety net for all Jews who don't want to be caught up in the flood. And this is by their own admission. To further illustrate the point, as we all know, not for the first time, of course, as far back as I can think, the discussion of the Gius Haredim, or whether Haredim should serve in the military or not, has been discussed in Israel ad nauseam, ad infinitum, going back decades. Particularly, it has again come to the fore in the past few years, mainly for political reasons. But not only, also because of the current war and what have you. At any rate, the vast majority of Haredi Rabbanim, brand name Haredi Rabbanim, state openly that we are opposed to all Haredi young men joining the military. Not only those who are actually learning in yeshivot, many do, but also those that we know and we admit are not studying. They're officially registered as being in this yeshiva, but in fact they're not here, or they're not there. They're not in that yeshiva. They don't spend most of their time there. They're actually doing something else. They're either working in some, off the books manner, or they are goofing off, or they are involved in all manner of iniquity. I don't want to even go into details. But they're not studying Torah. Everyone knows this to be true. I'm not giving it a percentage. I don't know the percentage, but it's a significant percentage. There were 2 or 3 well-known Haredi Rabbanim who, over the past couple of years, stated that we want all the Bahurim and Avrichim, all the young men who are studying Torah and Yeshiva, to continue doing so. That is necessary. That's how things should be. But those who are actually not studying Torah, they should go to the army. But they were a very small minority amongst the well-known Haredi Rabbanim. The vast majority, including, for example, Hagaon Rabbi Avigdor Nebenzahl, who I knew in a vague fashion many years ago. He was also, and you might think that he would say otherwise. No, he did not say otherwise. He explicitly said no Haredi young man should go to the army, whether he is studying Torah or not studying Torah. And I'm not expressing an opinion now on the subject. We can discuss that, but that's not my point. My point is that they, by saying so, freely admit that the yeshiva world is not simply there in order to disseminate Torah or to ensure the existence of Torah in the Jewish world or in the Haredi world. It's also serving other purposes. One of those, and the main purpose, beyond the obvious reason and purpose for having a yeshiva, which is to study Torah and teach Torah, the other purpose is to provide some kind of social safety net system for young Haredi men and women to live in a state of existence where they are separate from and kept separate from the world outside. And I understand the need for that, or the idea behind that. I understand that entirely. But it's necessary that even people who advocate that system and who defend it, it's necessary that if they're honest people and if they're wise people, they should admit this system also has many flaws and many drawbacks. And one of those drawbacks, one of the problems is that many young men who don't belong in yeshiva are in yeshiva. They don't belong there. They should be doing other things with their lives. They're just not designed for intensive Torah study for, let's just say, I'm not going to say 18 hours a day. Not many people study 18 hours a day, and not many people study 14 hours a day, but let's just say 8 hours a day, which is, the minimum you would be expected of you in any reasonable yeshiva, shall we say, right? Not everyone's designed for that. Those of us who know can state for the record that studying Torah for many hours a day is not easy. It requires a certain mindset, a certain kind of nefesh, certain faculties and capacities and inner drives and what have you. And not everyone's designed for that. And who could possibly claim that everyone is designed for that? Who could possibly say such a thing? How could a great Rav, a real Chacham, say with a straight face that every young man is designed for this regimen of Torah study that we have in our yeshiva here? He should come here and he should be here davening at 7 in the morning, and he should go home at 10 at night, and he has an hour off for lunch or something, and that's what he should be doing with himself. And from the age of 13, 14, 15 till at least the age of 35, 40 or something like that. How can anyone make such a claim when we know that some people are more inclined to scholarly and intellectual pursuits, and others are more into working with their hands? In other words, there are lots of wonderful Haredi people. I've met such people. Some of them are plumbers, and some of them are washing machine technicians, and some of them are in the building trades, or what have you, all kinds of things, which all of these things are very important. We all need such people. Why would I want to bring into my home, shall we say, unsavory types of people to do such jobs when I can have some good, God-fearing Jew from a Haredi background who can come and fix my washing machine? Why would I not choose to have that? Why would I want to have some either Scots Gamur or some very dubious individual enter my home to do such a thing rather than such a person? I would obviously want such a person. But that is not being freely admitted in the Haredi world now. And I think this is the cause for many cases of depression and dysfunction in the Haredi world.
Wow, Ralph. Thank you so much. That's so, because these Bachram are not doing things that they enjoy and feel productive about. And they go to sleep at night. And we're talking about these specific Bachram, not the Bachram who love learning. They feel like they're wasting their lives away. They're stuck in a system that is not meant for them. And there's tremendous shame involved. And there's no other option. That's really, they don't have. And like the Rav said, we need people, Erlicha people, to not want to rip us off. Car repairs, washing machine repairs, construction kabbalah type of, we need that stuff. Yet these Bachram, and this is right. This is exactly and
we need scientists and doctors and what have you.
Mathematicians also.
How many Haredi doctors do you know who are less than 45 years old in Israel?
Wow.
Who were brought up in Israel? Let's be more specific. Haredi Jews, let's say 45 years or younger, who were brought up in Israel, not an American Haredi person or someone from another country overseas, who lived in some kind of Jewish Haredi back home community, but studied medicine, shall we say, and then came to Israel. That is relevant to our discussion. How many homegrown Israeli Haredim do you know who are doctors, shall we say, who are 45 years or less? The answer is you know almost none, and I also know almost none. I have known over the years a few such people, and they were Israeli Haredim, but they were all older men, and they came from a different time and from a different place, where there was a certain sector in the Haredi world that was nevertheless more connected to the world outside, and studying medicine was not unthinkable, and that's how you had such people. But today, that's not going to happen. That's a tremendous waste of talent.
Where is the
And
safety?
no one should misunderstand me.
Mm.
I truly understand very well the Haredi philosophy and way of thinking. In fact, some would say I understand it too well. I've already been criticized for what sounded like some kind of a defense or seeing eye to eye with Haredim about this recent rally or atzeret or tefillah or demonstration, call it what you will. I
You
don't
judge them.
I
You
don't
judge
agree.
them.
I don't agree with all of Haredi ideology and thinking because I think there's a better way. But it's not that I'm incapable of understanding where they're coming from. And if you're not capable of understanding where they're coming from, then you can't discuss the matter at all. Then you're just not. You cannot make any intelligent contribution to such a conversation.
Your recent defense of the gathering, or at least your recent perspective, really showed on this video. I try to watch all of your videos and learn from you in every context. Really showed how deeply you care about the Haredi population. Showed how much you cared about all of Am Yisrael and bridging the Haredim into the overall segment of the Jewish population. And you don't pull any punches. And it showed you could see it from their lens, and you tried to get others to see it from their lens.
Yes, well, thank you for saying so, for your kind words. But what can I say? I think you're right. In other words, yes, I am trying to see all the various angles. And this is not the case generally, shall we say, in the Dati Leumi, the national religious Zionist religious world. Most of the Rabbanim in that world, and I don't count myself among their number, nor do I count myself among the number of the Haredi world. Um, I refuse to be categorized or placed in a particular box. Um, most of them do not see it that way. This came to light very clearly last week when prior to this rally, a certain well-known national religious rabbi expressed his position that his students should not go to this rally. They're clearly from a non-Haredi background. These are people who go to his yeshiva or his mechina kedam tzva'it, his pre-military Torah academy, whatever you want to call it, and then they serve in the army. And something like 25 or more of their former students have so far died in this recent war, for example. Hashem Yikom Damam. And he said, well, I don't agree with their ideology by not serving in the army. So how can I tell my students go to this rally? So I'm opposed to going to the rally. And that makes a lot of sense. But then he heard that his own Rav, Rav Tzvi Tau, was not of that opinion, but actually expressed an opinion more along the lines that I expressed. Not in the same words. I mean, I don't understand usually what Rav Tau has to say. It's very waffly and it's impossible to follow, and that's just how he thinks, and that's okay, that's fine. But the bottom line was similar to what I was saying, and he was actually in favor of his students going to that rally, even though they're not Haredim at all. In other words, you see, a majority of the national religious rabbanim are just on a different wavelength. They don't understand. They can't see that they should be on the same side as the Haredim, and they cannot see that as the pasuk in Tehillim says, "Haver ani lireacha uleshomrei pikudecha." I am a friend. I am a colleague of all those who fear you and follow your commandments. That should be the first and most obvious rule of thumb. That we're both people speaking in the name of Torah, living according to the Torah. So we should be able to work together or at least converse and understand each other in some fashion, but they're not capable. And that's, I think, a major problem. It goes without saying that most of the secular world cannot understand the Haredi perspective, but a Torah Jew should be able to understand the perspective, and also, I believe, should be able to see that the entire situation is tragic, as we're discussing, and deleterious to Klal Yisrael, and we need to. This has to change somehow. And without coming out and saying explicitly what we all know to be true, and that is, just as most Jews in the world read recently Parashat Noah, that the world became corrupt. Hamas, in every possible sense of that word, Hamas or Hamas in Arabic, and in Hamas in the original meaning in the Hebrew, in other words, corruption and violence and lawlessness. That's what Hamas means on every level. If we cannot get up and say, look, the world around us is Vatim Alei Haaretz Hamas, and all kol basar hishchit et darko, as it says in the Torah in Parashat Noach. In other words, people and as it were, creation itself was corrupted. And this is, of course, a result of one thing and one thing only, and that is, as Alexander Solzhenitsyn once said in a famous speech, when he was describing that which he heard from the old people, the old timers, when he was a young man in the early days of Soviet Russia. And the old timers who remembered the pre-communist years were saying to him, the reason for all that's going on, all the living hell in which we find ourselves here in the USSR, is because men have forgotten God. That was the message. It's an obvious and basic truth, which simple God-fearing Christian Russian peasants understood. And if they expressed that view too loudly, they frequently found themselves shot in the back of the head or in the Gulag. Correct? And this is what some of them said to Alexander Solzhenitsyn. And he expressed this many years later in a famous speech. Well, that's all very true, but you don't need to hear it from Solzhenitsyn because it's in the Torah. It's well known to all of us. It has to be known to all of us. When men forget Hashem, the world descends into something terrible, something horrendous. And you have to be able to face the secular world, look them straight in the eye, and tell them this. The world that you have created around us is a disaster. And if you want us to live differently, well, the society has to be different also, because we can't deal with that society. And yes, it's tragic and it's terrible and it's inexcusable, and you can complain all you like, and much of what you say will be true. But unless you admit that it is your godlessness that has brought these calamities upon humankind in general, and specifically upon Klal Yisrael, there's no way forward.
The topics we're discussing are so obvious, and they're not complex. This is not rocket science. It's basic seichel, it's basic intellect. Just how come this is not discussed more? I don't understand. I'm naive, perhaps. It's so. The Rav mentioned about Chanoch Unaro Vidarko. Like, so what happens to that? Everybody's put into a box, whether you in the box or not. Everybody's in the box. I mean, how are we going to continue a population like this, where everybody just has to fit into a box, and people's internal strengths, and the Rebbeinu Shalom gave talents to everybody. They don't get used. Nobody invests in them. They're just, I mean, where's the seichel? I don't understand. People far smarter than me are in charge, and I don't get it. Is there any answer to that?
I think there is, yes. If you understand, as we have said already, that Haredi society is an invention. It's a newfangled invention. There are some people very naive and people lacking in understanding and historical awareness. They think that Haredi society today is simply a continuation of what the Jewish people have been doing from time immemorial. Well, that's a fairy tale. That's not true. It's an invention. Yiddishkeit was reinvented by Agudat Yisrael, by the Haredi world 120 years ago, as a response uh, to the modern world, as a response to the fact that between 80 and 90% of the Jewish people had turned their back on Torah. This is not just today. This is going back 100 years. That was the reality already then. It's not that the Zionist movement invented secularism.
Okay.
The Zionist movement was an outgrowth of the new Jewish reality in which most Jews were secular. It's not by accident that the Zionist movement was a secular movement. Most Jews were secular at this point, as I pointed out before. When Rabbeinu Rav Kook was born in Tauresh Kaf He, 1865 Leminyonam, you could say it's hard to prove precise figures and statistics and what have you, but it seems roughly and generally correct to say that in Europe, 80% of Jews were frum, were religious, at least Shomer Shabbat. Okay. When Rav Kook passed away 70 years later in Torah Tzadihe in 1935, Leminyanam, they had been reversed. 80% of the Jews in the world were no longer Shomer Shabbat, were no longer religious. In other words, in his lifetime, the Jewish world completely shifted around. It was turned on its head. And the Zionist movement came to be exactly in the middle of that period, when Rav Kook was in his 30s, 40s. So Haredi Judaism is an invention. It's not authentic, it's an invention. It's a hora'at sha'ah. In halachic terms, what's a hora'at sha'ah? It's a stopgap measure, halacha, given by the Beit Din, as it were, to deal with a particular situation, a current crisis. But it's not the real McCoy. It's not the way the Torah should be. It's not the way the Jewish people should be living their lives. It's a hora'at sha'ah. It's a crisis mode version of Jewish life. And at some point, when you live in crisis mode indefinitely, for generation upon generation, then what are you in fact doing? You are perpetuating that which is abnormal and claiming that, or by dint of reality, you are making it normal. You are taking that which is abnormal and turning it into that which is normal. You are making something unnatural and into something which should be perceived as so it seems, as natural, as the natural order of things. But it's not the natural order of things. That's with regards to the Haredi world. On the other side of the equation, in the religious Zionist world, they made the mistake of deciding all too eagerly and all too completely to live their lives according to based on the assumptions and terminologies of the secular Zionist world. And when you work with another person's terminologies and use their language, and you become used to the way they look at things and the way they work and the terms they use, over time, that has a major impact on you. And that's why you have 50% of the Zionist religious world today, the younger generation, turn their back on Torah. So, but all these camps made certain decisions, all of which you can justify, but all of which have major holes in them. And eventually, those chickens come home to roost. And you need to deal with these realities. Now, the Haredi world is unwilling and unable to deal with these realities. And many of them, including many great Rabbanim amongst them, have convinced themselves that many of the fairy tales that they have been telling their students for generations now are in fact true. That's what the Torah really thinks, what the Torah really states. For example, that min Torah, those who study Torah are exempt from military service. It's not true. It's a lie. You can easily disprove this based on clear halachic sources. If I told you that, I think it's Daf Mem Daled Masechet Sotah in the Aruch Laner, a famous Haredi book which you'll find in every Haredi yeshiva, he writes explicitly, Talmidei Chachamim yotzim lemilchemet misua. All right, so it's written there. Do they quote that? They won't quote that. It's inconvenient, so they won't quote it, but it's there. But you don't need the Aruch Laner. It's in the Bavli, it's in the Yerushalmi, it's everywhere you look. But they choose not to know, because again, it's not about what the Torah actually says, what the Torah teaches. It's about a Hora'at Sha'ah. It's about crisis mode reality and management. Managing a crisis. You can manage a crisis in Hora'at Sha'ah terms as a stopgap measure, some particular time-specific policy. You can do that for a time, but not forever. And eventually, it's whatever is you're doing, because it's not natural and not normal and incorrect at root, it will unravel. And that's where we are today.
We're watching it.
Yeah, we're living in that reality. And both of these camps in the Torah world, the Haredi and the non-Haredi religious nationalist, Zionist, call them what you like, world, they all have the best of intentions. They do, or they did. And they all try to deal with a very complex reality, which is completely new in the Jewish world. In Jewish experience, there was never such a reality. And it's therefore not, it's not surprising that different Chachamim, different Rabbanim will come up with different stopgap measures to deal with that reality. And it's not surprising that they will not see eye to eye on everything, because it's not written anywhere explicitly and clearly what you should do in this situation. But the fact is, we see today that both of these ways of doing things are breaking down. And it's time for honest, clear-headed Talmidei Chachamim to meet, actually, so hopefully from different backgrounds, different groups who've heard different ideas from their various Rashi Yeshiva over the years, to somehow have a meeting of minds. And that's what a Beth Din is. A Beth Din is supposed to be a meeting of minds. But can you suggest, can you imagine seeing a certain Rav from Bnei Brak whose words were recorded, and I heard a couple of months ago, in which he said, we have to explain ourselves to these Rabbanim, these Dati Lomi Rabbanim. Who are they? They're nothing at all. They're Amei Aretz. What do we have? We have no. Why would we even spend our time trying to justify what we think or what we say to these people? And the fact is, the same disdain and lack of understanding exists on the other side as well. These people don't understand. They don't understand A, B, C, and D in the Torah, and we do. And when there's no possibility of seeing eye to eye on anything, on agreeing on even the most basic terms of frame of reference, then you cannot have a discussion. You cannot have a Beth Din. You cannot have a real Torah discussion, and that's where we are today.
This is so disheartening, and it is so sad. And I'm not trying to bash one sect over another. I mean, the Haredi world I bash for two reasons. Number one, it's the only world that I know. Number two is, I have to say, Rav, I expect more from the Haredi world because of they're so shakua in Torah. I expect more, and perhaps rightfully, wrongfully, but that's why I do hold them. I admit that I hold the Haredi world to a higher standard because of their dedication to Torah learning. And perhaps I shouldn't, but that's why. I mean, this is so disturbing and so sad.
Yes, but
I would expect.
you're correct. But keep in mind that as I explained, when the
Mhm.
system that you've put in place and which has been around for
Right.
some generations now is
Sure. Is on
unnatural,
emergency mode.
it's
Yeah.
it's unnatural and therefore
Mhm.
unhealthy. Anything which is unnatural is eventually
Right.
unhealthy.
Right. Right.
Correct? You
Right.
can survive something unnatural
Hmm.
for a time,
For a
but
time.
eventually
Absolutely.
it becomes unhealthy.
Right.
An unhealthy mode of living
Hmm.
engenders unhealthy behaviors.
Absolutely. A hundred
So when
percent.
you refer to various forms of behavior or lack of midoth or ways of looking at things and way of speaking, what
Mm.
have you, in the Haredi world,
Right.
and
Ah.
I think the same things exist in the
Mhm.
Tilumi world as well, of different
Mhm.
types, different sorts, but the same. We can point
Mhm.
to serious flaws in both camps. When that is the reality, then an unhealthy, unnatural, untenable way of living, where at root it's untenable uh, over the long term, it will result in all manner
Mhm.
of aberrations and unhealthy and even very, very harmful and pernicious behaviors and mindsets. And that if you keep that in mind, you will understand everything that you're referring to.
Right. Now, thank you. When you use the term crisis mode, it's no different than sending a soldier into a field for months and months and years at a time. The human body can only sustain crisis mode or trauma for a certain amount of time. Eventually, there's a breakdown of the entire system. The body can't handle it to always be on guard 24/7. It's just that's now, thank you, Rob. That's very clarifying. The crisis mode, emergency mode, can only last for so long before
I'm going
everything falls apart.
I
Yes,
think we all need
yes, hmm
to sign off.
yes.
just like
Thank
Again,
you,
I'm
Rav.
not I'm not saying that everything we discussed was
Mhm,
necessarily very
mhm.
emotionally uplifting
Right.
or
Reality.
optimistic, but you need sometimes just to call the shots, as you see them, and state the
Absolutely.
reality as it is, in order to hopefully eventually come to terms with that reality and then begin to be able to deal with it. If
Hmm.
you bury
Right.
your head in the sand, then you won't get anywhere.
Right. A hundred
Well, I'll just
percent.
share.
Thank
I'll
you,
share
Rav.
at the end. The hopeful note is Rav Bar-Hayim. I think you're the bridge. You and what
Hmm.
you have shared and what you represent, and it can be all of us can follow in your footsteps and some meeting of the minds. You are the bridge between these worlds, and you are the voice of reason, and some other courageous leaders as well. And we can hopefully
Well,
follow in those footsteps.
again, thank you for your kind words. I don't know if they're deserved, but you all must do the best we can and speak the truth. Speaking the truth
The
is the
truth.
solution to all things. That is
Hmm.
Amen.
the only true solution to all things, no matter how
Wow.
difficult it may be.
Amen.
Shalom lechem,
Shalom. Thank you,
hizku,
Rav.
v'yames levavchem kol ha'meyachalin Adonai. Shalom v'nisachon.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Shalom, Rav. Thank
Shalom.
you.